All right, so we're going to be doing some mindful drawing to start off our series. And as I mentioned earlier, we're just going to be using some really basic supplies today, something to write on and something to write with. And so I have a variety of paper here. I always, I always joke about how my road to becoming an artist was the same road to becoming a hoarder, because I tend to collect so many things thinking I can use this for something. And so what I have with me today is a scrap of construction paper, a tester sheet from a printmaking process, and then I don't even know what this is, but it had some pretty colors on it. So those are the papers that I'm going to be using today. And then I have just a number 2 pencil and a little pen. So go ahead and pull out something to write with and something to write on. We're going to be using that. We're going to be using those supplies today. Now, most mindful drawing focuses on a variety of mark making, pattern making, bringing in a variety of color and shapes. And we'll be doing that throughout this series. But today, since this is our first time together, we're going to kind of go back to the basics. The basic mark making, which is lines and circles. And I know that doesn't sound exciting, lines and circles, but I promise there's a benefit to it. We're going to do a couple exercises today and then kind of glide into our mindful practice. But hopefully you'll feel that kind of soothing mindfulness practice or mindfulness that comes with this practice. So let's start off. I'm going to use my piece of construction paper here. I'm going to start off with my pen. And so we're going to kind of focus on drawing lines to start off with. Now, I know you may be like me, and that first mark is always the hardest for me. I've been doing art making for several years, and a blank page still intimidates me to this day. And so one of the first things I always do when it comes to mindful drawing is I start off by just making a square, making a box. And so what this does is it gives me kind of just a little guideline of where to draw, but it also does that first mark for me. It takes kind of that intimidation of a blank page out. And so you're welcome to do that square, that box too, or just work on your blank page, whatever feels most comfortable. Well, let's go ahead and just kind of get comfortable in your chair, whatever you're sitting in, and let your body relax a little bit. Maybe notice the rhythm of your breathing. Let your body just slow down for just a moment. Head and take your pen or pencil, whatever supply you're writing with. Let's go ahead. We're going to make some lines across the page. I'm going to kind of loosen our hand up a little bit and just kind of get started. So I'm going to take my pen and just do some lines going from one side to the other. They don't have to be straight lines. They can be curved. My lines are close together, but yours don't have to be. You can have them close together. If you want, you can do them far apart. But this practice that we're doing right now is just focusing on that basic mark making, drawing those lines from one side to the other. Just kind of take our time making those lines. You can go fast. You can go slow. Whatever speed feels comfortable to you. Just go ahead and make those marks. You can see my lines aren't the straightest, and that's okay. Some of my lines go outside the square I made, and that's also okay. just make those marks. We're just starting this practice today. Pulling those lines from one side of the page to the other. Using that basic mark. I find this exercise really helpful, just sitting down and doing those straight lines. I find it really helpful when I'm wanting to draw, but feeling a bit unfocused or overwhelmed, or just not knowing quite where to start. I can watch these lines just kind of fill the page and appear. One of the great things about this type of exercise is that we're not thinking about the next step. You know, usually when we're doing any kind of drawing or making, we're kind of thinking a step or two ahead. What supply we need next, what mark we're going to be making next, what shape or color or piece of paper, whatever supply we're using, we're kind of thinking a couple steps ahead. But the benefit of doing something like this, where it's just that mark making, just building that line up, is that it's that repetition. So you don't have to think about that next step. Your body is just getting into that rhythm, right? And there's something about that slow rhythm that can feel really soothing. And I find when I'm doing this mark making, that the more lines I make, the neater it tends to be. The closer my lines are, the slower I'm breathing. Sometimes it takes a while to get there, and sometimes it doesn't always get there. And I know it might feel a little silly doing a page of lines, but like I said, for some it can feel really soothing. And you know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very much a hoarder of supplies. And so something like this is such a great piece to use in a collage or something else that I'm working on as well. So once you're kind of going through and you're making these lines, pulling them one side to another, if you're not finished filling up your page, know that that's okay. You can continue doing the lines if you want. Or you can move on to our next little exercise. We're going to focus on circles for just a moment. And so I'm going to take the other side of my paper, and just like I did with my lines, I'm going to draw that little border. The border is not something that I have to stay in. It's just kind of a starting mark for me. So if it feels good to do that border, go ahead and do that border. So what we're going to spend time doing now is just drawing a bunch of little circles. It doesn't have to be complete circles, perfectly circular circles. They can be different sizes. They can be overlapping. Whatever feels right, just start building those circles up. You can fill the page. You can start stretching them out into lines. They can be oval. They can be large. They can be super tiny. Try not to think about the placement as you're making these circles. Just start adding those circles and see what shape, what image starts to appear. You can go slowly or quickly, whatever speed feels right to you now. Go ahead and practice at that speed. A lot of creative mindfulness, a lot of mindful drawing Mindful art making focuses on slowing down and being present, right? Um, and there's a lot of benefit to that. And we'll be doing a lot of that in this series for sure. But today we're just focusing on that basic mark making. So just continue to add those circles, large and small, crooked and wonky, or perfectly symmetrical. And just start to fill your page. And again, try not to think about how you're placing these circles or what pattern or shape is emerging. Just kind of let the circles appear. And again, you can go slowly or quickly, whatever speed feels comfortable. And fill in all the spaces or leave gaps. Just kind of fill those spaces in. I know I said sometimes it can feel a little silly just doing these circles or lines. But there's something nice about that repetition. I think that's why I like doing a lot of those fiber-based projects like crocheting, weaving, because you're doing that same motion over and over again. You're not having to really think about next steps. You're just doing that same process, that same motion, doing these lines and these circles. And just kind of filling in those spaces. Not making anything in particular. Just kind of putting those circles across the page. You're still making those circles. No, that's okay. You can continue to do that for sure. But if you found that stopping place, you kind of like where your drawing is, you can go ahead and put your pen down for just a moment. I want us to kind of take a moment. I'm going to pull out a new piece of paper. We're going to spend a moment kind of combining these basic marks. One of the reasons that I wanted to focus on this basic mark making today, the lines and circles, was to kind of, one, something simple for us to kind of start off with our first time together, but also to kind of illustrate that you don't have to do anything fancy. It doesn't have to be these intricate patterns. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a variety of colors or shapes or marks. It can be just something simple like a line or a circle that can bring that quiet moment or that moment of focus for us. So I want us to kind of take a moment and really kind of combine these two, the lines and the circles. And so, excuse me, I'm going to start off. I'm going to use a thin line. Let's start off, if you have a clean sheet of paper or part of a paper that is new, I'm going to be using a scrap piece of paper today. Let's go ahead and pull out that clean piece of paper, or clean side of a paper. I'm going to go ahead and you can follow along with me if you like, or kind of do your own shapes as well. But let's go ahead and start filling the page with some circles. Do bigger circles, smaller circles. They can overlap a little bit. We're going to be doing some circle shapes and filling them in with lines. So hopefully you can see on my paper here, I've got some that are overlapping quite a bit and some that are touching just a little. I encourage you to do that same process. It doesn't have to be completely covered. I'm just going to do some overlapping circles today. You can see I've got some small ones, some larger ones. So I've got some circles here that are kind of overlapping each other. And I'm going to use a marker just so it's a little easier to see right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making lines in those circles. And for each circle, I'm going to change the direction of that line. So for example, I'm going to start with this circle right here. And I'm just going to do some straight lines in there. Fill it with those straight lines. Then I'm going to turn my paper just a little bit. And in that next circle, I'm going to fill in lines going a different direction. This is just kind of combining both of those things that we just did, those circles and those lines. We're doing it in a slightly different way. And so for each circle that I'm doing, I'm slightly turning the page so those lines go in a different direction. I'm not worrying about making the straightest lines or staying really inside my lines that I started. Just really focusing on that mark, turning that page, and adding those circles, those lines to those circles. You can go as fast or as slow as it feels comfortable. Just for filling that page or filling each of those circles with those lines. Slightly turning your page a different direction for each circle. And one of the really nice things about a process like this is that you start to see these very nice moments of overlapping that come from this type of mark making. And again, it's just that simple mark, doing those circles and those lines. Slightly turning the page, making those marks. Know that your lines don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be super straight. They don't even have to stay within the circle that you've drawn. Focus is not this beautiful piece in the end. The focus today is on just being present with your pen or pencil, marker, whatever utensil you're using to mark with. Kind of watching this pattern appear, doing just these simple marks. I know for me, maybe for you too, it's hard to kind of get that idea of perfection out of our mind. You know, um, I want to spend a lot of time on making it as straight as I can. Um, but that's hard to do. I have a shaky hand, so I have to just kind of accept that that shakiness is part of the process for me. There's something I say a lot in our groups, and you will probably hear me say it over and over again here because it's something that I need to hear. Um, but there's this wonderful Japanese idea of wabi sabi, which is all about beauty and the imperfection. Um, and that's something that like I said, is something that I need to be reminded of quite often in my own practice, that it doesn't have to be perfect. Whatever mark I make is right and good. It may be wonky or crooked or off the page, and that's okay because there's beauty in that. It's not just about the finished piece, it's about that time spent doing that making. I have to say, I was doing this with a young niece a few days ago. And before we realized it, we had been sitting there about an hour and a half just doing this process. We had a big piece of paper, and it just felt so good to spend that time just making those marks. And we didn't even realize that that much time had passed. It just felt good making those marks. And so getting rid of that idea of perfection is hard. But what that does is it gives us the opportunity to really enjoy that process of making. And so I want to encourage you to really, really focus on the marks that are being made. Again, knowing that whatever mark you make is good, whatever shape that appears is good, whatever line that you make is good. It's part of what makes this process enjoyable and beneficial. And hopefully, as you're doing your drawing, you're seeing some really nice patterns happening, some nice moments that are showing up. And the truth is, it's just lines and circles. It's this simple mark that we're making that's kind of building this shape. I'm going to add some more circles to mine. Just kind of fill in some of that space a little more. Like I said, each time you go to a different circle, slightly rotate that page. Let those lines go in a different direction. See that kind of cross-hatching that starts to appear. These are simple marks, nothing super fancy. Maybe it means filling in more spaces or adding more circles. Just kind of give yourself permission really be present in this mark making. And if you find yourself getting a little distracted or your mind wandering just a little bit while you're doing it, know that that's okay. Our brain is just doing what it was meant to do, to think and to process. So if that happens, be gentle with yourself and just kind of guide your thoughts and your attention back to this drawing in front of you, to the tip of your pen or pencil and the mark. That's the marks that are appearing in front of you. You can go, like I said, go as fast or as slow as feels comfortable. We'll talk more in coming weeks about taking our time with things and the benefits of slowing down. Like you said, today is just about making those marks, those basic marks,